What's up, everyone? It's Prodigy Gaming. I'm here with my first ever video. This video is actually going to be a part of a 4-part series covering a tournament that I played in person this last weekend. This tournament was USCF rated, and each game was 45 minutes with a 5-second delay. For some background, my rating is about 1,000, a little bit over 1,000. And in this first game, I had the white pieces against the player whose rating was about 800. My original goal was to complicate the position as much as possible and try to use my superior tactics, most likely, to outskill my opponent and end up getting the win. However, as you can see in the game, my opponent played the Karu Khan, and this position I'm not too familiar with, so I ended up going into a position that I regretted a little bit that was very simplified. And as you can see, I went knight f3, he went d5, and we ended up trading and going into a game where there was pretty symmetrical structure. Instead of bringing my bishop out, I decided to go into a kind of 4-knight structure, which continued to simplify. As you can see, we both brought our bishops out, and then he traded, which I was happy about originally, but then I realized that I had to trade as well in order to not lose my d4 pawn. So at this point, we're in a pretty symmetrical structure. Obviously, he has a e-pawn in exchange for a c-pawn. But, so overall, I'm a little bit unhappy with how, or in exchange for a b-pawn. Overall, though, I'm a little bit unhappy with how this game started off, because I've realized that my unwillingness to go into a more complicated structure with an unfamiliar open led me into a game where it's going to be very difficult to find winning opportunities. So, what I probably should have done, going back to the beginning, was just advance, and after he brings his bishop out, get a big hold of the center. But alas, going back to where we left off, after all the trades occur, I'm stuck with this position, and this is now what I have to try to win with. So I decided to go rook e1, just put my rook on the open file. You can't really go wrong with that move. He brings his bishop out. Now here, I didn't want to trade much more. As you can see, the engine likes this bishop f4 move to try to trade bishops, but I really wanted to keep more pieces on the board. I decided to play bishop d2. But this move is not great for a couple of reasons. My bishop isn't on the worst square and it connects my rook, but it's also not really threatening that much, and it allows him to play this next move, queen b6. Now, the valuation says equal, and I know that I could have played bishop g5 and probably attacking his knight and probably creating a lot of counter threats. But instead, I decided to play queen d3, and this move is fine. But after castles, I probably should have defended my pawn. Instead, now I decided to play bishop g5, attacking the knight on f6. But now, since my queen's not attacking f6, it actually allows him to take this pawn. And after takes and takes, I do get an open file and activity, but he is just up a doubled pawn. At some point, I do expect that I maybe would have been able to create some attack on his king. But that being said, this probably would have been bad for me if I went for it, or if he had went for it. Luckily for me, he decided to reroute his knight. I probably should have pushed b3 at this point, but if I pushed b3, I was a little bit worried about this pin, although I probably just could have went back. Instead, I decided to play rook a b1, which probably wasn't my best move, and it actually did allow this e5 pawn break at some point, which after trading would have allowed him very much into my position. Luckily for me, he did not go for this. He went for a similar idea, but that is much less powerful. He decided to go for c5. And luckily for me, I have this resource, which is knight c4, a fork. It doesn't win any material, but it allows me to take his pawn before he can trade into my position too much. He decides to offer a queen trade, and at this point, I don't really want to trade because I want to continue keeping peace on the board and trying to find winning opportunities. But I realize that trades are kind of forced. So at this point, I really spent a lot of time figuring out what trades were best to keep my position together and to make sure that he didn't have any big advantages. I decided to trade with the knight because I realized I really had no choice. After he took with the knight, I realized that his queen was in a very good position, so I decided to open up the A file in order to get rid of his active queen. After trading and trading, I played a3 in order to get rid of that weakness. I was happy because I thought that at this point, my best opportunity was to attack his weak b pawn that's on its own. It's kind of what we call an island pawn. But what I didn't realize, what I probably should have realized, was that he could just immediately trade that pawn off. And I had... Oops. And that actually... One second, let me just find the spot. And so once he trades this pawn off, he has no more weaknesses, really. And I feel like since he has such control of the a-file and much more, and in my opinion, a better bishop, I'm actually a little bit worse in this position. However, the engine obviously says equal because there's no real big advantages either ways. I do, however, play a very bad move, which is rook e3. I kind of, especially right when I played it, saw that he could pin. I realized it wasn't that big of a deal, though. But then, when I looked into it further, I realized that it could be a little bit of an issue because he wins tempos. So here, after he plays this move, I have two options. I can counterattack, but after trading and trading, he can take, and then he's up a pawn. I decided not to go for this. I decided that definitely my best option... Second, sorry, fast forward a little bit. I decided that my best option was to just go rook g3 and take. The only issue here is that he can play rook c8, and I'm in a little bit of trouble because I did not want to give up a pawn, but after rook c3, I realized that if he played rook b8, I would be in a very bad position because if I went back and he took... Sorry, this is the wrong situation. But if I went back and he went here, I would have no way to actually protect both of my pawns. So I realized that could be troubling. Sorry, I showed the wrong variation at first. But to my relief, he did not take advantage of his extra tempos, and he gave me an opportunity to retreat by playing h6, and he actually gave me the opportunity to play my move without wasting a move. He basically just wasted a move because he forced me to play the move that I already was going to play. He decided to push g5, definitely thinking he could maybe expand on the king side. The issue is that I found this nice move h4, and now he really has some problems because of the pin. He decided to play f6, and although I probably had something better, I decided to trade, and here I got a little bit overzealous, and I actually kind of hurt my position. I played some random moves trying to attack his pawns that were kind of what I call one-movers. But I really thought that I was really just hoping that I could overall get into his position and try to create weaknesses. So I decided to push here, forcing him to push, just so I could go back here. The issue is that I missed this rook a2 move, where if I push the pawn, I actually run into a few more issues of my own. After he pins here and trades. Overall, his rook seems a little bit better than mine, and this pawn, my b pawn, may end up becoming a weakness. So I decide after this to just trade, and after he takes, I have two rooks on the board, which I think is better than one, to help support my c pawn. At this point, I'm still hoping that I can find a way to win, but I've realized that I have messed up this position, traded too much, and that overall I might just have to ensure that I don't lose this game. So I decided to go back, which, without realizing it, was another very bad move, because in order for me to defend this pawn now, I would have had to go here, which is kind of awkward and makes both of my rooks a little bit stuck. But luckily for me, he decided to play this rook h8 move. I don't know exactly why he played it. I think he might have been thinking at some point I would push this pawn or something, or maybe he wanted to support his pawns from the side. But overall, this move really actually takes his rook away from the action, and I felt like this was the start of him really just losing sight of his plans on his goals and kind of just going a little bit berserk, to be honest. This move made me very happy because I realized that it was really just going to give me an opportunity to gain a few tempos. So I decided to play rook c1. I now felt like my pawn had a lot of support behind it, and I realized that I realized that I kind of could just continue pushing my pawn, because at least for the time being, he doesn't really have any way to stop it, especially with my rook behind it. So I was expecting him to bring his rook back and kind of just and kind of just end up blocking my pawn, and then at some point we would probably have ended up trading off most of the rooks, and it probably would have ended up being a draw. But he decided to bring his king, and at first I thought that he was maybe just putting his king in more active position, because obviously my pawn offers no immediate threat to him. So I was a little bit excited to see if maybe he was going to bring his king over, which I was going to be happy about. But I was also kind of just thinking that he was probably just securing and improving his position. So I decided to push c4 because I thought, why not? Of course, it shows that if he played here this move, that he would have been a little bit better, probably just because of all the open files he has. But to my relief, he decided to bring his king over. And around here, I realized that I would actually maybe get some chances. Because after I pushed the pawn, I realized that my pawn is starting to become more advanced. And if he retreats, he wastes a couple of moves, in my opinion, critical moves that make my pawn less scary. Because now if he goes back, my pawn's here. I'm getting a pawn to the 7th rank pretty easily, and with my rook coming in, I thought that at some point this could be good for me. So, but instead of this, he continues with the blockade with king c6. But then so the engine's saying rook a3, but I find an equally good move, which is rook d3. Because I realize that I am actually threatening this pin, threatening this move. Let's just say he does nothing. And not only am I taking the pawn, but I'm also supporting my pawn push to c6. So, but here, he decides to avoid this pin, where he decides to avoid this rook fork, and he plays king b5. But here, and this move makes me very happy because I realize that no matter what he does, I am most likely going to win this game now. Because for whatever reason, in attacking what he most likely thought to be a weak pawn, he's brought his king out and weakened all 3 of his pawns. So, because when I go here, what he doesn't realize is that I'm still threatening, he still cannot protect his pawn. Because if I go here, if he goes here, I can just check and I win the rook. So in a way, his king is still under attack. So what he should have done in this position was probably something like this. That gives me the option to take and then push my pawn. Now, this is, as the engine evaluation says, it is most likely winning. It's in between. But considering I'm higher rated, and this endgame is very tricky with my passed pawn, and I could probably at some point end up trading my passed pawn and trying to collect his 2 other pawns, I realized that this would probably be winning for me. So luckily for me though, making it very simple, he does not realize that the threat that I have here, and he decides to play here, protecting his pawn through counter threat, because if I take, he can take. But luckily for me, I have the tactic, I have the check, and he just loses the game. He makes it very easy for me. And he resigns after this move in view of the fact that even worse than taking his rook, I have checkmate and very soon. And this game ends up getting wrapped up. So obviously this game would have wrapped up really quickly anyways. And with that, I get a much needed win in the first round of a 4-round tournament, where the prize money really only goes to players who have around 3 wins out of 4 games. So this set me off to a very good start that recently I've become accustomed to, but in this higher division, it really set me up for what could be a very good day. So after starting off, I knew that playing this 800 rated player as white would be a great opportunity. After starting off how I did in the opening, I'm very fortunate. I knew that I was very fortunate to get this win, and that I could not go into games like this again. And that in the future, especially against better players, if I want to win, I have to create more complications and be willing to take, I guess, more risk and uncover a more advanced position. But luckily, luckily, I was able to get blessed in this game and get the win. So, if we go to the game review, I looked at this earlier, and I've played a perfect game, 96%, and he's played 87%, but I don't feel like I've played a perfect game because this 96% is really just representing me playing easy moves. And we both, he played 87% because other than his one blunder, he played easy moves as well. As you can see, we all played pretty well. We both played pretty well, but there wasn't really any tricky moves for us to find, any difficult situations, and I think that that's the issue. I would much rather play 70 or 80% in a game, that in a tricky, confusing game, and get the win than play 90% in a game where I risk just drawing by trading all of the pieces off. So this is a learning experience for me. I'm really happy to get the win, and it's works well in two ways because I also learn from this game, and I learned that it's really sometimes, even though trading is nice because it's not as difficult, sometimes in order to really if you really want to win a game, you have to go for more. So this game, really happy with it. It gave me a lesson, and I got the win. It's so basically the perfect combination. With that, I moved to 1-0, 1 point out of 1 in the tournament.